What's up, guys? It's Drillbit Beats here. I'm going to do a little bit things differently today. I've got a pack of stems in from an artist named Camo the Cool. He's a rapper, engineer, and producer, kind of jack of all trades out of Dallas, Texas. He sent me over some stems today to do a little bit of a mix tutorial. So I'm going to go through, mix a little bit of the beat. I'm going to mix the vocals. And I'm going to bring you guys along. I'm going to try to switch up the channel a little bit, start doing a little bit more content like this on the side, as well as the free beats every Friday. So if you haven't yet, please do hit the subscribe button somewhere down in here. And I would really appreciate it. Anyways, so I'm going to jump into this mix here. I'm going to flip over to the other screen and we'll get started. Don't be surprised in this mix if there's not a whole lot of EQ that I'm going to be doing or a whole lot of compression. As I mentioned, Camo does a lot of engineering and producing as well as being a musician and an artist. So he is kind of, let's just say he knows what he's doing. So when I get stems from somebody like that, obviously he sent me over a reference as well. I'll play for you guys. That's always a thing that if you are going to be mixing for other people, vocalists can be really picky. So if they already have kind of a demo mix that he likes and the artist likes, ask for that reference. That way you have something to work off of. But anyway, enough about that. I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to flip over to the other screen and we'll get to work. Alrighty, so first I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to play that reference track that I received. So we'll go ahead and solo this out.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the Cool. Yeah. Alright, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah. No carry on, but my life is such a trip. Hey, life is such a trip.
So right off the jump there, I'm noticing that we have a little bit of muddiness when that 808 came in. Seems like things kind of clash a little bit there. So especially if you're getting a mix that's already pretty solid, I think this one sounds decent. It's definitely above a lot of things that you'll probably receive. But if you get in here and you find that, like, as you're listening to it, things are starting to stand out and things jump out to you and you're starting to realize that, oh, maybe this could be a little bit better or this could be improved on. I always recommend as you go through it, just kind of jot down some mental notes, or if you have pen and paper, write them down if you prefer. And that way you're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak, of the song. He already has a vibe going. He has kind of like, you know what that artist is hearing in his head. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to listen through a little bit more here, just give you a taste. And then I've already gone ahead when I receive the stems. Always important to be organized. I have all of the voices and all of the different vocal parts here all separated out and color coordinated, so it's real easy. In just a second, I'm going to walk you through how I usually will send the main voice, the backing vocals rather, and then any of the ad-libs and things like that. I'll send those over to a bus, and then what I'll do from there is I'll put the effects processing and things like that on the bus. Generally, the only time I'll do anything directly on the audio track itself is if there's something that really needs crucial maintenance. So if something that's really harsh or if there's fuzz in the recording, that's where I'll start that process. So let's give this a little bit of a listen. Let's take some notes here mentally. Maybe you guys hear things that I don't, and that's the beauty of it. A lot of that is just subjective. That's what music is. So let's see here.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the Cool. Yeah. Alright, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed.
We'll let it roll until that next hook.
No carry on, but my life is such a trip. Hey, life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa, I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky.
Taking a note of the rim. Seems like it's a little bit hot.
Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzles. Got no business with no. Myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. I don't need to go to PE. Wanna know my health secrets?
Alrighty, so let's jump in here and hear what it sounds like with just the basic stems, no effects, anything like that. Now, the other thing is, I like to mention, you'll notice that on Camo's voice in this version, there is still some tune. If the artist has already taken the time to perfect and make their voice sound the way they want, and they can bounce that out to you, I always find that that's beneficial. Where that becomes a problem is if they then want to, say, go back in, without the use of something like Melodyne or something that can be kind of a little bit more controllable, it can be a little bit difficult to keep it natural. So you may just want to check with the artist if that's the case. It's sometimes better to get the raw vocal and make sure it's a good take of that vocal. But here we go. So this is the version that I received as far as just dry stems. We'll listen to that.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the cool. All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah. No carry-ons, but my life is such a trip. Ay, life is such a trip. Life is such a trip.
Alrighty, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it, and I've already organized them, so I know this section here, for example, from these two tracks, is going to be all sent to the same bus for processing because it's the main vocal that's in the song. So Vox 1 and 2, we're going to go ahead and come in here, highlight both of them, and we're going to go to your output. And then send them to a bus. So they're going to be sent out together to a different channel. It will automatically create it here. And then what you'll do is you'll come in here and you'll name it whatever it is. So for this case, it's going to be main voice. And now if I play it back,
all right, here we go.
There is still audio coming from these two tracks. However, it's all the output volume. Everything you're actually hearing to your main is going to be coming through this, so any effects we put here will be affecting that sound, and then it's dumping that into the master rather than each of these tracks individually going out to the master. You can still blend them here, so I may come back in a minute if we find that we wanted to balance these out or anything like that, you can do that. But then normally what I'll do is I'll come in here and I will take those, and we may find there's another few vocals in here that are part of that main voice in the song. So what if I do, we'll add those to the same bus 6 that we named main voice. So let's go through here and find if there is any of those.
All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another Ay, life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such.
So these two here are going to make up the main for the hook. So we'll come in here and we'll send those to that same voice. Now in a little bit, we may end up sending those to their own bus and just duplicating it. That way we can control the volume a little bit easier for, say, the sections. So like where the hook main comes in, if it seems too loud or anything like that, it gives you a little bit more customization there as far as what you can tailor in and dial in for that mix.
All right, here we go. Look. The trip. Ay, life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly.
Let's see here. Does this have Ad-Libs in it?
Life is such a trip.
No. Okay, perfect. So that's going to go to that same bus, which we have there. Perfect. And
all right. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. In the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie.
And then if you remember from our notes from earlier, we thought that I believe it's going to be this rim here, this like tick tick kind of like loud. Exactly. This sound here. Why don't we just drop that down for now and we'll deal with that in just a moment.
All right, here we go. Trip. Hey, hey. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is
already better.
Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. In the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. In the lie. Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa.
And then once you've created those buses, if you're wondering how I'm going to be able to get to them, they all come here. Sometimes, depending on the session, if it's a big session, things like that, it can get messy. But in a smaller session, you can actually bounce these out. All you do is do create track, and it'll drop it up here in this window for you.
All right, here we go. Look. She's no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah. No carry-ons, but my life is such a trip. Hey. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such.
Alrighty, so we're going to jump in here and see, and I may end up using a different plugin. This is going to be the Butch Vig vocals from Waves. I find that just to kind of get a vibe for the vocal, and sometimes it gives you a little bit of flexibility here because you can dial in this tube. So if you have sections of a song where your vocals sound a little bit thin, I find that sometimes when you turn on the tube here for a saturator kind of effect, it does fill out a little bit of space with the vocal, and then you can dial it in a little bit more here. These are just EQ parameters, similar to if you're a guitar player, you would see on an amp.
All right, here we go. Look.
Let's click through a couple presets here and just see if we can catch something that we like that we don't want to spend so much time dialing and tweaking.
All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah.
Clipping here, so we're gonna want to pull the output. A little bit of clipping here. We're gonna pull that output down just a touch.
All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah. No carry-ons, but my life is such a trip. Hey. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. In the lie. Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no. Yeah. Find myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. I don't need to go to PE. Wanna know my health secrets? I smoke gas. Every chain in the membrane. No trees, so I'm never going insane. Yeah. Hey, gotta make it way and break myself. Ain't no concerns about my safety. To the top, I'm tryna bring home the bell. Being low key, I wanna be like Kobe. Living life with no regrets. Knowing in this life is a test. I'm a man 'cause I'm here.
Alrighty, so this is still pretty hot, so we're gonna pull this down just a touch. And then the sensitivity here, if you guys do own this plugin, or if you end up trying to go in and do one of the demos that sometimes Waves will put out where you can demo the products, this guy here. This sensitivity here shows you that you're getting the input signal. If this is red, it means you're pushing that signal too hard. Yellow is kind of where I like to hit it. There is green. Sometimes I find on vocals though, if you lower your input settings to hit the green, it loses that magic kind of crunchy, like nice vocal that I like. And then I did add in this RVox here. What I'm going to do with this is I usually just pull it down a little bit. I'm looking to get about -3-ish, like on the 3-ish line over here. Or not -3 rather, but just 3-ish here. So about half of this.
Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on it.
And then you get kind of that bottom end like fatness back. If I turn it off.
Alright, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends.
With it.
She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah. No carry-ons, but my life is such a trip. Ay. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky.
There we go. And now you'll notice by pulling this down, just gives us a little bit more headroom here to mix in later.
Alright, here we go. Hey, life is such a trip.
So if you're wondering what the vocal sounded like before,
alright. Hey, life is such a trip. Life is such.
And then now.
Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip.
Without.
Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. In the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. In the lie. Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no. Yeah. Find myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. I don't know. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. In the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. In the lie. Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no. Yeah. Find myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. I don't need to go to PE. Wanna know my health secrets? I smoke gas. Mary Jane in the membrane. No tree, so I'm never going insane. Yeah. Hey. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah.
And you'll see here that if I were to zoom this all the way out, it is a fairly large session because I have all of the individual stems. This would be the same process though if you were mixing to just the overall beat. So sometimes you'll get receive files, or when you're mixing, maybe you just have the beat file that's an MP3 of the beat with all the elements together. Totally fine too. You would do the same thing with the vocals.
Life is such a trip. 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 Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and go over to the Ad-Libs. Let's clean those up a little bit, make them a little bit more sharp. I think that if they're a little bit more raspy, they may blend a little bit better with this.
Trip. Ay. Life is such a trip. 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 Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. Got no problems when you know you
And this is all just basic EQ. It's just not quite as fancy as, say, a graphic EQ. I sometimes think that's better because it forces you to use your ears instead of your eyes.
Trip, ay, ay. Life is such a trip, life is such a trip, life is such a trip, yeah. Life is such a trip, yeah. Life is such a trip, yeah, 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 yeah. Whoa, I got fly, I stay down with my head in the sky, in the sky, in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie, in the lie, yeah. Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no. Yeah. Find myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. I don't need to go to PE. Wanna know my health secrets? Grass. Mary Jane in the membrane. No tree, so I'm never going insane. Yeah. Hey, gotta make it way and break myself. Ain't no concerns about my safety. To the top, I'm tryna bring home the bell. Been low key, I wanna be like Kobe. Living life with no regrets. Knowing that this life is a test. Going up, got some hair on my chest. Going up. Trip, ay. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got.
Alrighty, so if I take that off now and we're listening to the vocal, I'll solo it so it's even easier for you to hear, and then I'll play it with the main vocal for you. So, without anything,
Yeah. Trip.
with it.
Trip. A trip.
Real simple. Basically, all we did, we went in, added a little bit of that low frequency back into it. With this here, it's going to be the very high end range of the frequency in the vocal. So we went ahead and pushed that real hard because I wanted it to be kind of tingly, almost sparkly feeling in your ears. And then this here is going to be a very kind of mild compression, just to kind of fatten up that so that it doesn't sound thin in comparison to the main where we added compression earlier. And then from there, it does have just a touch of reverb on it and a quick slap here just to kind of make it feel a little bit more space. I feel like it makes the vocal just a little bit more pronounced. And then here, if you're looking and you're wondering what this is, basically just a stereo spreader. What it's doing is it's taking that vocal that's still down the center essentially, and then it's splaying it. I know if you follow Alex Tomei, he hates this plugin. I think it's a really fast way if you're just trying to get the sound into the computer and kind of catch a vibe with things. I think it's a great way to get things up and going. Obviously, he's probably way better of an engineer and he could explain to you why he doesn't like this plugin, but I think it's great. So we're going to keep it moving here. So that's what I'm going to show you here is that's going to be the ad-lib, and then we have our main. This is with all of the effects on it.
Trip, life is such a trip. Life is such a
just a little bit.
Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa. I got fly. I stay down with my.
And then before, if you wanted to see for comparison, this is what we had with no effects on either the main or the ad-libs.
Trip, life is such a trip. Life is such a
with everything back.
Trip, life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip.
And with the whole beat.
Trip, life is such a trip. Life is such a trip.
So normally if you have a reference track at this point, what I would do is I would go back over to your reference, play just the reference. You don't want to blend that with any of the other sounds that you have going or anything like that at this time.
Trip, life is such a trip. 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 Yeah, life is such a trip. Yeah. Whoa, I got fly. I stay down with my head in the.
And then what you'll do after listening to that, you'll want to just mute that again and see if yours is somewhere in that pocket.
Trip, life is such a trip.
Keep in mind, we're only listening to the vocals,
Trip, ay.
as it's the only thing that we've touched yet. I haven't touched anything in the beat. Generally, if I receive the stems to a beat, producers are already, for the most part, now this isn't true in all cases, but a lot of times they will do a lot of EQ and sample choice, and there's a reason they picked the sounds that they did. So what I'll do when I get to that is I will go in and do a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of cleanup, to make that a little bit more just, I like to make things clean. I like them to feel like that everything has a space in the instrumental. If you remember our notes from when we listened to the reference track, and I can play that again if you wanted, we'll notice that 808, when it comes in there, it feels like it's muddy. I find that sometimes people push that 808 because they want it to come out of the mix. They want it to feel bigger. When in reality, if you were just to lower your vocals a lot of times, you can make that 808 hit harder without actually having to add volume, and then it doesn't mud up that mix like that. The other thing is sometimes producers, they like that big low-end rumble. Sounds great when it's just a beat, not always great in all settings, especially if you were to master the track, things like that. You'll want to remove some of that low-end content. Otherwise, it leads to that muddy sound that you just heard. So let's come over here and... I apologize too if it's been kind of distorted with the beat not being leveled or mixed in this. This is probably going to be a little bit easier way for you guys to hear things in relative. There we go. Hopefully that sounds a little bit easier in your ears. I didn't realize I didn't have that set up. Normally, I don't put this on until the end after everything's balanced. That way I'm monitoring here, not at 0. However, I would be monitoring at what all the combined volume is. So at some point here, I may click this off. I'm just doing this for the sake, the way that I have my live feed set up for the video so that you guys can hear the audio in here comes directly through. So I apologize on that. First time I'm doing this, so you'll have to just work with me. And then on this main vocal here, I feel like it needs a little bit space, kind of like what we did on the other one where we had sent it. So what I'll do is I'll come in here, I'm going to send it to a bus. Now, what's different between sending this way and the way that we did it before by using this button, this here is going to continue to put the audio directly through to the stereo out. It's just going to create an effects loop, basically, where it's sending off to a unit. So let's go ahead here, or to a preset or any other kind of sound that you wanted to blend in. And the reason I'll do that, and you'll see in just a second, if I want to add reverb, if you add the reverb directly onto this channel here, it's going to sound like the vocal's just underwater with reverb because everything's going in. You can't blend it with the original sound as easily. So what we'll do here is this is going to be the volume. So if you click on it, you'll notice it's at -infinity, meaning no sound. And then you can add the sound in. So by adding that, what we did is you'll see here it creates the additional bus channel. Let's call this one Reverb Vox. And then we'll come in here. Let's grab a reverb. To be honest, you'll probably laugh at me. One of my favorite reverbs to play with vocals is just the built-in one that comes with Logic. Let this all load in. And then reason being is if you come in here to the presets, you get tons, just absolutely tons of different sounds. So let's come in here. I want it to do, let's do a plate reverb. And then we can play with this a little bit. So right now you're not going to hear anything on that vocal. I'll solo it so it's easier. Notice how there's no reverb. As I mentioned before, this is the amount of volume you're going to send to that reverb. So right now it's at -infinity. You'll hear it come in as I start to add it.
Trip, ay. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip.
Notice how that gets nice and full. Now never add this without context to say the beat in the instrumental, because otherwise you'll end up sounding like you're in a bathroom again accidentally. So let's pull it back down. And now I'm going to blend this in as it's playing until just enough that we can hear it. And I do find that this is easier to set up in headphones than it is on your mains, especially this part, because it is kind of more one of those fine detail type listening events.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah, life is such a trip, yeah, 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 whoa, I got fly, 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 I stay down with my head in the sky, in the sky, in the sky, you keep blaming me for the reason you lie, in the lie, got no problems when you know you can't solve. With no,
I like that there. You wanted to hear it without it?
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip.
With it?
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip.
Without?
Life is such a trip.
With it.
Life is such a
And where it becomes a little bit more evident, especially because the beat's not mixed, is if we come in here.
trip, ay. Ay, life is such a trip, trip. 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 Life is such a.
And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll come back over here, for example, on the ad-libs, just so that they sound like they're the same vocal. You can actually add it, so you're sending a little bit of that sound in there as well, just to kind of bring it to life. So let's bring this up here.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such.
Whoopsies, I had them all highlighted at the same time. Don't do that. All right, so let's reset the main vocal real quick, and then I'm going to do that same thing with the ad-libs. And then I'll show you how I usually set up my delay. It's very similar. I just create a new track, and we'll do the delays.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, yeah. Life is such a trip, yeah, 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 yeah. Whoa, I got fly, fly, fly. I stay down with my head in the sky, in the sky, in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie, in the lie, got no problems when you know you can't.
And if you wanted to hear what it sounds like solo, that's what we're sending. So that's what you're actually getting as far as the effect. Dry vocal. Remember when I said if you dropped it right on here, you would no longer have a dry vocal? Therefore, it gets pushed to the back of the mix. The more reverb you have, you can kind of bury it and set it into the mix. So you don't want to do that on your main vocal or an element of the song that needs to be really present for the listener. You'll hear that a lot on budget mixtapes, things like that, where it's a great vocal. Unfortunately, they throw pounds of reverb on it, and then it buries it, and you can't hardly hear it, and it sounds like it was recorded in a bathroom stall. So don't do that to your mix. Not a good move. Would never recommend.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, yeah. Life is such a trip, yeah, 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 yeah. Whoa, I got fly, fly, fly.
So I'm happy with that vocal as is. Now let's go ahead and see if we were to add on these ad-libs. Sometimes if you want to go for kind of a cool effect on a song where you have space, if you add an additional send here, sometimes adding a little quick delay can fill in some spaces here. So let's just do delay. And we have the same option here to send that volume. So let's come in here and pick a delay. Do a stereo delay. Whoopsies, clicked the wrong one. We wanted a sample delay, getting ahead of myself. Tape delay is what we were looking for. Gotcha. Alrighty. So then here, I usually go for something that's going to be really quick. So let's start here with a 16th note, just kind of a quick slap on it.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, trip. Life is such a trip, blah, blah, blah. Whoa, whoa. In the sky, in the sky. In the lie, yeah. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. This with no myself.
So I think I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. So another plugin that I use a ton is the Cla Effects. Once again, Alex Tomei, sorry my man. Go ahead, shoot me the angry DM. Put a sad face down below. It would make my day. Alright, let's see here. So you'll notice here, not clipping. I realized just a second ago, by the way, that horrible fucking clipping sound that was playing, pardon my French. Don't leave your reference mix playing. I even made a joke about it earlier, and then I did that exact thing. Happens all the time, especially if you just have it dropped into your session for easy reference. If you want to avoid that, you can always just drop it into, say, iTunes and play it from there. I just like to be able to really quickly just go bing and be able to reference it. Obviously, this one's going to be already mastered out to where he wanted it, so it's going to be clipping like all hell. That's why we were like +5 earlier. So I do apologize about that. We're going to get this fixed now, though. So just a side note. You notice, though, now that we've gotten these kind of blended and I've been playing with all the different volumes within the plugins here, even with just the vocals, it's kind of smoothed things out. Now we're going to jump over to the beat side because I'm happy with the vocal sounds that we have. And we're going to start to kind of tweak the beat around that vocal. I want the vocal to kind of shine on this. Obviously, if an artist put time into writing lyrics and they're putting out a song, they should be the main element of the track. And then everything else underneath of that, that would be just kind of whatever makes the vibe of the actual sound of the track. So just our beat element here is going to be this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to send all of these to their own track. We have the main voice, and now we're going to create one here that's just beat. That way we can control the overall volume of the beat. Alrighty, and then normally what I'll do when I start to mix a beat, what's the first element that you hear come in? And then usually depending on the type of genre that I'm mixing, I look for like whatever element's kind of that one that the ear picks up on and it identifies with the genre of music that we're doing. So what I'll do here is I will start the beat.
like that too. Yeah.
So I would go out on a limb and say personally, these elements here are going to be what's the core of the beat. Generally, a producer, when they make an instrumental, whatever that first sounds that come in, they're going to be continued throughout the beat. So those ones are kind of important to get the volume and like the different frequencies and things like that. If there's any harshness in them, get those cleaned up first and it will make a huge difference on your final mix. So I'm going to start on these elements here, just kind of going through them. It looks like we have a piano. There's a high bass, I believe it looks like. Some synths, and then a pad potentially. So let's see. So our keys, pretty vibey. I feel like the high end in that just needs to be made a little bit prettier. Other than that, I like it. I think it sounds good. And that's the cool thing. A lot of producers, like I said, they put a lot of time into the sound selection, so you're already going to have good sounds if the beat's good. One of my favorite things on pianos, I'll show you here in just a second. You can hear already that just the bass version of this, like without touching anything, just the way it loads in, it adds so much just warmth to everything. So let's close this from our vocals. That way I have a little bit more screen space. And with these keys, that's without anything. Now, with the keys, I personally don't think that we need any of that low end information. So let's come over here and let's just turn this guy on. If you notice, it's already been pretty low cut off. Let's take this. Take a little bit of subtractive EQ. And then let's put it into this and make it pretty. So same idea, green's good, so let's keep that going. I don't feel like the lows in this are really needed as much. Take them out. You start to get the kind of jingles up in here. Alrighty, so if I take off what we did before, after, and then let's come in here.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the cool.
So if I set this to 0 and I hadn't touched it like I hadn't originally, another cool thing that I can do now is if I take this off, I see that this element was down here. It's just, you know, this range. If you notice, we added a lot of volume, but sometimes in the context of a mix, that just put it out of whack. So you'll need to use your ears to kind of dial it back in with the rest of the beat.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the cool. Yeah. All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends.
So it sounds like almost like a Detroit style bass, but it's a high bass that's gonna go with the 808. Just come in here. I think it definitely needs a little bit of compression. Already sounds good.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the cool. Yeah. All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman.
That's without it. With it.
We just make hits like that too. Yeah, Camo the cool.
Same thing. Want to see where it was before I added. About -18. What I'm doing by doing that, though, is you're ensuring that your volumes and everything are similar to what the artist is already hearing. Little gem, if you add just a shitload of volume across the board and then somebody else comes back and they listen to it, they're going to be like, this doesn't even sound like the same song. Remember, we have a reference, so we're trying to kind of keep it in that pocket, just improve on it. We're not reinventing the wheel. So play this back. We know that if I bring in this sound, we want it to kind of match. Not way up here, but down here.
Like that too. Yeah, Camo the cool. Yeah. All right, here we go. Look. She say that we no longer friends. She gave up on a gentleman. She say it's another failed attempt. Yeah. No carry-ons, but my life.
So we got some marimbas here. What I would call it, I guess, a synth marimba. I think it needs some high-end presence. And something to kind of bring in a little bit more of that brightness in it. And if you're wondering, that's just a preset within, this is an API clone, I guess you could say, or a plugin version of it. All I did is I have a grand piano setting. I saved a version of my own from the template that they had. I use it on anything that I just want to brighten up. Let me reopen that. If you want to, if you have this plugin, you want to sample it, or if you want to snag it and then tweak from there, that's what it looks like. Same thing here. Always like to just check on an instrument like this. See all this low end that we don't... all that's going to do is get in the way of your bass. That could be contributing to a lot of that low end rumble and fuzz that we've heard. Let's bring this guy in. To me, this is more of a mid-rangey kind of low-high frequency instrument. I'm gonna put that same plugin that I did on the last one. Let's close that. Actually, I'll show you another little trick. So if you just hit Option, click and drag, you can actually just bring that over in Logic. duplicates that same sound. All that does is bring in a lot of that air that's in the synth, kind of that distorted stuff that's way up in the high register, the frequency range. Let's see what we were at before. Alrighty, here's probably a good spot to mention. No two 808s are ever the same, unfortunately. So let's go ahead and play the 808 for you. By itself, if you'll notice, it has a lot of punch, a lot of kick. A little muddy, but not bad. But when you add in other elements, because they share frequency space, you'll notice how muddy it gets with just these elements of the beat. So I would recommend, obviously, we've kind of matched these on this bass, given what we're doing. For sure, we are going to want to cut some of that low end. I know it's an 808. I know it's so cool to have that rumbly thumbly, but we can't do that. So we're going to drop this guy in here. Before, you'll notice in a second when I add compression to that all of a sudden that low end where it was all muddy and combined and kind of glued together nastiness, it'll start to have its own texture and its own space within the mix. And believe it or not, normally I don't like to add areas like this into a bass line, but I do kind of like this. I'm going to play it with the vocals and make sure it's not going to clash, but I do kind of like it. It feels like this 808 specifically knocks right in this area pretty heavily for smaller speakers. And that's something when you're mixing an 808 you do want to take into consideration, because if you are at any point going to be mixing down an 808 in which you have a desire to have it played in a club and be popular for people to play on, say, their iPhone, you got to be able to hear the 808 in the song. So let's see here. we want just a little bit more space, obviously, here for the next plugin to play. Alrighty, let's move on to this clap. Cleans that up just a touch. Play it with the song.
Trip, ay, ay. Life is such a trip. 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 Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah.
So hi-hats can be kind of cool. One of the things I usually like to do is we come up here, add some excitement to it. And I have a I feel like that little bit of just kind of like almost like lowers the sound, it sounds like a little bit, but I like the way that it plays with the hi-hat. I think it makes it a little bit darker. also sound pretty cool on this. Very much so.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah.
So in the original mix, this is one of the things we made a note about. It was a little bit loud, especially if you play it. So let's come over here and
trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah, life is such a trip, trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah, life is such a trip, yeah.
So all I'm doing now is I'm just kind of going back in and tweaking the levels so that we're not clipping here on the master output for the beat when it's everything zeroed.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah, life is such a trip, yeah, 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 yeah. Whoa, I got fly, fly, fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. In a lie, got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself.
Alright, so one of the cool things that we have the ability to do now, now that we're kind of to this point, is we have our main voice, Ad-Libs. So this is our whole song. So now instead of having to manage 30 or 40 faders, you only have to manage 2 or 3, and you can get a little bit more precise. That's the advantage of mix bus mixing versus just throwing everything on the individual tracks. You'll notice that I did do that on the beat because there's not really a lot of these elements that are the same. I mean, technically you could have gone in here and said, okay, well, these 3 I'm going to treat all together. But that's just not how I do things. So I don't know. That's just food for thought.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, 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 yeah.
And if you'll notice, when we started earlier, we were at like almost 1 dB of clip on our master output. Now, if you'll notice, we're not clipping at all. So now what I usually would do is once we get the blend between the beat and the vocals and everything the way we wanted, which we can always use the reference for to see how the artist liked. So what I would do in this case is I would come over here and play the reference.
Trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip. Trip, ay, trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah, life is such a trip, yeah, 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 whoa, I got fly. Oh, I got fly, 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 I stay down. Trip, ay, ay, life is such a
The other bonus, as you just saw, towards the end of a mix session, you'll see my CPU up here is just pegged out. I don't have a very fancy computer. I'm mixing right now on a Mac Mini, and it's an older Mac Mini at that. If I were to have gone in on every single vocal track and done this same vocal chain, we would have been to this point just on the vocals. We would have never even got to the beat. We would have had to start doing freeze tracks, and then it's just frustrating, and it takes away from the creativity of mixing. So by doing that, if you don't have a $5,000 computer or like crazy specs on the computer that you're mixing on, then at the end of the day, like it's a great way to be able to use plugins that are really CPU heavy and be able to use them without having to stack 5 or 6 of them on a mix.
trip, ay, ay, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, trip, life is such a trip, yeah, life is such a trip, yeah, 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 whoa, I got fly, 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 I stay down with my head in the sky, in the sky, in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie, in the lie, got no problems when you know you can't solve. Ain't got no puzzle to solve. Got no business with no myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. Going up. Go to PE, wanna know my health secrets. I smoke that. Yeah, I smoke that. No trees, so I'm never going insane. Yeah. Hey, gotta make a way and break myself. Ain't no concerns about my safety. To the top, I'm trying to bring home the bell. Low-key, I wanna be like Kobe. Living life with no regrets. But knowing that this life is a test. Going up. Got some hair on my chest. Energy going up, nothing less. I feel like I'm the best. Yeah. I run a marathon, you on a race. I'm hitting the gas, 4x for raw for any terrain. Can't live in the past, you wanna learn how to move different ways. I put on the packs, this is the movie, I'm Bobby Boucher. You want the water, boy, get on the way. I run a marathon, you on a race. I'm hitting the gas, 4x for raw for any terrain. Can't live in the past, you wanna learn how to move different ways. I put on the pads, if this is a movie, I'm Bobby Boucher. You want the water, boy, get on the wave, yeah.
So that's usually, if you ever wonder what on this master output, if you ever find that your tracks sound really thin or that they're not like radio ready, as some people would say, it's probably because they don't have anything on the master chain. Some people prefer to balance it out, send it to a mastering person. If that's the case, leave your output channel completely dry and just send them your mix. I'm going to send this back to Camo, and I want him to be able to hear it relative to his mix, which was mastered. So I will go ahead and tweak the master parameters here in just a second. So you kind of get to see a snapshot of, I call it a quick master. If I was actually being sent files to master, I would actually take a little bit more time on this step. I'm happy with the mix that we have so far. So that being said, I'm just going to kind of add the effects that I normally would. This here replicates a SSL compressor that the desks have on them. It's from Waves. I know there's a ton of different versions of it, so you can kind of dial in these same settings. Generally what I do for my mastering preset, I'm looking to get about 3 dB of compression. You can do it to ear, obviously, like everything, but I find that that's kind of the sweet spot. I know that on the hardware version of it, you don't usually push it as hard. You still get that gel. To me, what it's doing is it's kind of just gluing everything in the track together, and it brings out like that downbeat of the kick drum or the 808 in a song, I feel like, a little bit better. And then obviously just a limiter for the Waves L2 is what I use. And then I usually will tweak these settings here.
Trip, ay, ay. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah. Life is such a trip. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got fly. I stay down with my head in the sky. You keep blaming me for the reason you lie. Got no problems when you know you can't solve. Got no business with no myself. Why everybody hate me? I had to go and climb myself. I don't need to go to PE. Wanna know my health secrets? Every chain in the membrane. No tree, so I'm never going insane. Yeah. Hey, gotta make a way and break myself. Ain't no concern.
And one last time, let's play it against the reference, just see how it sounded. Not as compressed, I don't feel like, and it's not as muddy. Versus. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Now, if the artist prefers that type of vibe, obviously, if you come in here and smash it. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. Life is such a trip. You get that same effect. I feel like having it when everything's not smashed together, though, I feel like you get a little bit more clarity out of the mix. Just a personal preference, but that is how you get that same sound if I wanted to duplicate the reference mix. I think a lot of the muddiness in the reference mix is coming from that exact thing. So personally, I would come, like I said, probably back up into, say, this range. Versus if I was still down in. You hear when I pull that threshold, you get the attenuation here, and then everything just smushes together and it melds, and it's horrible. So I don't do that. I tend to put it up here and just let it run. And every song's going to be different. My goal is that maybe 1 or 2 times through the song, it might light up the attenuation light here. And that's just personal preference. So that's the hook. And we touch it like 2 or 3 times, the hook. And that's pretty much it. So I hope that you learned some things. I hope it wasn't horribly painful for my first time, and that you'll walk away from this with a few different things that you could maybe use on your mixes or things that you picked up. Please do, if you're still here with me, if you haven't yet, subscribe. I plan on trying to get better at these videos. Hopefully they are not too bad on you, and I will be able to continue to make them. In the meantime, though, if you would, please do check out the description box down below. Description box down below is going to have all of Camo's contact information, his socials, things like that. Please do go give him a follow. Great guy. He also works on recording, things like that. So if you're in the Dallas area, hit my man up. And anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and you have an awesome week. Keep out there recording and killing it, guys. Whoopsies, that was almost bad. Stop recording.